Thank you. Thanks for joining, everyone. Again, my name is Ned Johnson, and I'm thrilled to be here. Just a little bit about myself. I have about 15 years of project management experience and about 12 of those years in agencies. And for about the past 3 years, one of my main focuses has been starting to bring, agile methods to our work here at GTB. So I'm happy to share my experiences with you on that journey that I've been on, and look forward to a good discussion with you guys.
Hey guys, this is Brandi Whitaker. I am currently an agency project management consultant. In my previous experience, I spent half of my career on the account management side and then shifted the second half to the project management side, including different responsibilities in agency operations. So today, working with Ned, we have a good perspective of just our own personal experiences and also just things that I'm hearing out in the industry with various agencies that I'm working with. So we're excited to share that with you today. Before we get started too much, we want to just go through an agenda with you so you'll know what we're planning to cover today. And there's just a few key areas. First, we're just going to kick off and just talk through what is Agile. We know that there's a lot of buzz in terms of that word in the industry, so we want to talk about that. Why Agile in agencies is important these days, and what does that look like in an agency? We want to talk through some key areas that we have seen success and information that we know out in the industry of what makes Agile work, and then really leave you with a plan today of how would you get started if this is something that you want to implement within your organization. So to kick off, Ned's going to take us through what is Agile.
All right. So Agile is and I want to stress these points, is a people-focused, communications-oriented way of working that is really based on responsiveness to change and ability to act quickly. So I'll stress it again. It's a method that focuses on people doing the work, and it stresses communication. This is not, follow A to Z steps and you'll be up and running with Agile. As you'll see throughout the presentation today, we will talk a lot about cultural change, a lot about what it takes to get Agile up and running in an organization. But before we dive in a little deeper, I want to pass it back to Shelley for one of our first poll questions to understand among our participants today, what's your level of experience with Agile? So Shelley, I'll let you take that poll over.
Awesome. So the poll has been launched. Everyone take a few minutes to read your answer choices. They're the bubble style. So when you click on your bubble, hit submit, and then we'll share the results. So I'm going to give everyone a couple seconds. It looks like we've had close to 83% participate, which is fantastic. Thank you guys so much for getting involved. So just a couple more seconds left before we close the poll and share the results. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Right, so let's see the results. We had 20% say no, not at all. 60% say we are piloting projects. And the last 20% are we are up and running with Agile.
Awesome. I think it's a perfect blend of an audience for our conversation today. So Brandi, pass it back to you about answering a question about why Agile in agencies. And bear with me while I get that screen going again. Okay.
Yeah, so why Agile in agencies? The first thing that I think is really important to talk about is Ned and I both sit on the 4A's project management committee, and this was a big topic in one of the last meetings that we had. How are agencies doing this, particularly traditional agencies that didn't start from a digital standpoint? And so when we started to put this series together, this was definitely one of the topics that the whole group thought would be helpful for other members of the 4A's. And it's important to point out that Agile feels very much like a buzzword in the industry right now, but it means a lot more than that. It's not just a thing that gets implemented and then you're done with it. It's methods and it's parts and pieces that you can use to change your culture. And so before we get started talking about that, and Ned, you can even flip to the next slide, it's important to note that this is not just for digital. And I think that that is an assumption in the industry that the digital agencies have to be agile. And if you don't have digital work, you don't need to worry about it. I think you're going to hear today that the methods of agile, the tenets, the behaviors, the things that make it up, those can be applied to any project. And it doesn't even have to be a creative project. It can be how your company operates. It can be how your departments integrate and work together. And so that's really why this topic was placed in this series and why we wanted to give you guys some content to help think about things for your organization. So the next section we're going to talk through is why agency and agile, but we've broken it down into kind of 4 key areas that we think are really the reasons why agencies need to be thinking about this and addressing this. One is our projects are becoming increasingly complex. I doubt there's anyone on the phone that would not agree with that. Ned's going to talk through that a little bit more. Second is we as organizations must really be able to adapt to change quickly. Our clients' businesses are changing daily. They have different needs for their customers. And so we as partners with our clients need to be able to adapt and change midstream and deliver whatever our clients need on behalf of their customers. In addition to that, we need to be able to meet their demands because of the changes that are happening in their business. And in order to do that, building a deeper collaboration with our clients becomes more and more important every day. And last, I think industry-wide, a lot of the agencies are saying and feeling that if they don't go agile or have parts and pieces of agile, that they feel like they are becoming antiquated or could become antiquated. And it's really challenging us to think about how we operate and how we work together. So we'll dig into each of these 4 areas a little bit deeper in this next section and talk you through some specific thoughts on those.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into that complexity idea. So I'm going to refer to what I like to call the sort of the old days of advertising. A campaign, of course, it could be big and challenging with tight deadlines, but things were fairly straightforward. You created some, print work, some TV work, and then, we got into the .com stuff. But the thing that is key to point out here is that when something launched, you were largely done with the project. Of course, you would do some measurement and maybe some, tweaks and follow up. But you hit your ship dates, and the ad went on TV, or the site launched, and you were largely done. But what has changed today? So if you look at this, you don't have to look at it in detail, obviously, but this complicated diagram that I grabbed from Gartner, it shows what a marketing operations team and the sort of the work streams they have to follow today look like. So it's everything from programmatic TV to developing experiences to site development work to products that require deep integration, say, with your client's IT organization. So advertising and marketing today is not like it was in the old days. About today, it's getting your creative, your experiences, and your messaging to the right person in the right place at the right time. And to do that, you have to be ready to change in a moment's notice. So that is just that vastly increased level of complexity that we've seen here over the past several years, and we feel pretty strongly that methods within Agile provide that framework to help agencies and work in that new highly complex arena. So then our second point was around adapting to change. So when's the last time that everyone has seen a project end delivering exactly what was identified in the statement of work? Probably not too often. Of course, there's usually battles on timing, scope, and changes. So it's really hard for any of us to predict at the beginning of a project where we're going to end up when that thing is done. So that's one of the other key reasons why we feel strongly that an Agile framework can help you deal with that consistent need to adapt to change. And this is a quote I like that's just in my view sums it up, that client service today in creative firms is driven by the need to accommodate project change. I mean, that really is the key point right now. If you're not set up in a way that accounts for project change frequently and consistently, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, and another equally important reason that we feel like this is top of mind and important to talk through is just meeting our clients' demands. As we talked about, they have a lot of demands to deliver on their business success right now. And working in a more agile way and getting your clients to come along with you is going to be really helpful from a collaboration standpoint. I think it's important to point out, though, that even if your client is not showing any signs of wanting this, asking for it, this is something that they still need, and doesn't mean that it can't benefit the relationship that you have with the client. I think I'm sure we all have been in situations where work comes in to the agency, your internal team works on it for a duration of time, say 6 to 8 weeks, and then you get back in front of a client to show them what you're doing. And that's kind of what, as we go deeper into this, you're going to see is the definition of, we don't have that much time anymore, honestly, to deliver things. But what will change about the working in an agile way is that you're not waiting long periods of time before you're getting feedback from your clients. And when you're talking more and spending more time together and sharing work more frequently, it helps the trust level with your clients, and it also helps them come along with you, particularly if they have a different perspective of what you're working on, so you haven't wasted a lot of time. I mean, this continuous collaboration is a fundamental part of the agile methods. And lastly, I think industry wide, we are hearing, if we don't do something, if we don't go agile, are we worried that we'll become antiquated? And that's definitely kind of a pulse that we're getting from agencies, whether they're doing it or not. They're wanting to know what they should be doing. And I think it's important to know that everything we talk about today from a content standpoint is, there's not one way for every organization. It's how to infuse it to work best for you. But I will tell you that a lot of clients are asking, how are you working? And we're definitely seeing that in early stages of RFPs, in the very first new business meetings. Clients want to know, how do your teams work? How are you going to work with us? And they want to have answers to this. So one thing to take away is that, can your organization answer that? Because you really should be able to answer how you work on different types of work. And as we get into the methods of Agile, you'll see that a constant change, being able to pivot and shift along the way in terms of however you work with your clients or the projects you're working on is going to be really critical. And just tying into that point, there are a lot of industries that are embracing Agile. It's not just advertising and marketing. It's not just digital agencies. NPR has Agile methods for how they create their programming. John Deere and Saab, they have Agile methods for how they create their products and build and manufacture. Mission Bell Winery, in terms of how they produce wine, and GE and Capital One, they have almost shifted the majority of their internal company operations to be in Agile methods. And that is a really impactful thing to think of, these Fortune 100, 500 companies that have been able to make these changes, and how they are recognizing that these shifts are needed. And one of the core things to think about as it relates to Agile is all of this is based on how they can deliver better things to their customers, whether they be broadcast, or whether they be cars, or whether they be banking services. And that's kind of why they're changing holistically. I thought this next quote was really nice, as you were looking at a lot of the operational changes at Capital One that the CIO put forth as they made those shifts, that Agile speaks to some elements of human nature, of how people like to work. People like to collaborate. They like to move quickly, to make decisions quickly. They like to produce stuff and get stuff done and see progress. And I think that is a great parallel to most of the advertising agencies out there. I would say a large makeup of all of our employees live and breathe in that type of way every day. I mean, they're there to make things. That's what they're doing. And that just further, kind of defines why these methods are great in an environment like an advertising agency.
Okay, so let's try and answer the question, what does Agile look like? Before I take you through a detailed view of that, I feel that it's important for some of the newcomers in this conversation about trying to give you some history where Agile came from. So the principles of how you work in an Agile framework have been around for a long time, but there was a fateful day in 2001 at Snowbird in Utah where several well-respected developers put the principles of Agile on paper into now what's somewhat a famous document called the Agile Manifesto. And before I jump into that, I don't want you to ignore this because it came from software developers. I think Brandi made a good point that these methods of working are applicable across many different mediums. So here's a high-level view of this Agile Manifesto. So first, Agile encourages individuals and interaction over process and tools. And then they say, working software is more helpful than comprehensive documentation. And then these last 2 points, I feel are some of the strongest reasons why this type of framework could be so helpful in the advertising industry is that collaborating with customers and stakeholders is more effective than negotiating contracts. And then finally, responding to change, is more effective than following a plan. So if you had talked to me a few years ago, from my, career as a project manager, and someone says to me, this idea like responding to change over following a plan, I think you're crazy. But we'll explain, why these methods can work for you. Another disclaimer here. So this is a chart by this Agile expert by the name of Craig Smith, who sort of warns people that there are at least 40 different methods of Agile. So it's important for each of your organizations to understand that, assess what's right for you. What I'm going to share over the next few minutes is largely based on my experience, that I've been involved in over the past few years, and it's most closely aligned with a form of Agile called Scrum. Okay, but it's important for you guys to understand that and assess what would work for you. Okay, so I think the best way to just start to talk about Agile and describe it to people is compare it to something. So I'm going to compare it to what I'm sure the majority of us are familiar with in executing our projects today, something called the waterfall approach. So I'll take a digital project, say building an app. So in waterfall, you do, and you guys are familiar with this, but you do discovery work and you define requirements. Then maybe do UX and technical design simultaneously, and you typically wouldn't start development work, until you had approvals and sign-offs on the UX and design. But how many weeks later is that? And then once you start development work, you're going to develop that whole darn app, right? Okay, but what are some of the things that we're missing on this chart I have on the screen? So after the requirements phase, you're going to go through reviews and approvals with clients. You're going to do the same thing, after the design phase, likely. Then once you, get ready to launch this thing, obviously you're going to go through extensive reviews and approvals of the work overall. But what typically happens, and this has been all too common in my career, around the end of that development phase, that seems like it's when customers are bringing to the conversation changes, new functionality requests. Why is that happening at that point in the project, this late in the project? Because let's be honest to ourselves, this is really the first time clients have something in their hands, something tangible that they can really react to deeply, and it gets the conversation going. So I'll say it again. So I've been doing this for a while, and I am sort of honestly saddened by the fact that I didn't start embracing Agile a little bit earlier in my career, because I, had struggled with, managing projects that are, so prone to change late in the game. What I've learned and some of the things that we've been doing here have really made a positive impact on the way we execute projects. Okay, so that's a view of that waterfall approach.
Yeah, and Ned, I'll add to that I think we could all agree that changes always happen, and how can you respond to the changes in more of a solution way of how you can solve them rather than them feeling like they're disrupting the project. But one thing that I definitely see in a lot of agencies that I work with in terms of their workflow, and as they're assessing, they are saying they want to have a better workflow, I consistently hear the same thing, is that our review cycles are disrupting our work. And those are twofold. They're internal review cycles. They are people that are coming in at a higher level that weren't involved in the original part and changing the direction of the project. And then there are client review cycles. And sometimes all of those people are not on the same page at all. So it's just key to point out that seems to be something that a lot of people are struggling with.
Absolutely. I can't, I echo those sentiments. Thank you, Brandi. So instead of that waterfall approach where the project is worked on until there's, one big release happens at the end, Agile teams create and they release work in small increments. Now that doesn't have to mean that, you're launching things to the public. In my experience, using that word, release, can really apply to, when you're sharing key pieces of work with clients. So let's take that app example again and put a sort of an Agile filter on it. So in that example, instead of, going through those steps I outlined in the waterfall approach, the team might decide that the best thing they can do is get something in the client's hands to react to as quickly as possible. So they decide, hey, let's do a quick prototype of the app. So of course, not a fully functioning app, but enough of the screens so that clients have something tangible to hold in their hand and, swipe through and discuss. So to do that, the team spends a day maybe, sketching out screens and some, creatives come up with, general look and feel directions. Then maybe a UX person or a developer turns those sketches into, a prototype, in a couple of days. Then the client reviews that work with the team and gives the group feedback. So it's fast work. It's, definitely work in progress stuff. It's rough. But the key point is that in a matter of days, clients have something tangible to comment on. And they're not back in the office, and I've heard this before, wondering, gosh, what's the team doing, writing those requirements? I can't wait to see something. So that is that's a high level view of, what something that is in the Scrum world is called, sprints. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit more deeply, a closer look at a sprint. And I'm going to take you through, what I think are, 7, key steps within a sprint. Number one, so the key is to determine business objectives. And we typically do that using some type of workshop, which is, really a team-based approach where the people who are responsible for doing that work on behalf of the client are part of, a workshop setup where they are, understanding business objectives, and their voices and inputs are heard. And there's a key person, in that conversation, to help ensure that the customer's, key business objectives are understood. And that's something that's called a product owner. So that person, and I'll talk more specifically about that role, but that key thing to note about that role, that's an empowered voice of the customer, someone who really knows the space. Okay. Then, as a list of items that are required really to get the job done are, defined by the team and that stakeholder, this is known as the backlog. And this backlog is really, managed by that product owner who has that, authority and say around, what are the key things that are going to deliver on those customer objectives. Then number 3, yeah.
I think we should flip to that slide that has the build of this on it so they can see as you're.
Okay. Are you not seeing that on the screen? I'm sorry.
No, I'm not. Shelly, are you seeing that?
No, I just see the static slide.
Yeah, I see the sprint. We're still on the sprint, so I just wanted to make sure that everyone could see as you're talking through that.
Oh, thanks for pointing that out. Let me okay, how's that work?
I'm still on your sprint slide. The with the cycles on it. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Let's see. Shelly, do you perhaps want to maybe share my screen again or something? Let's see.
Sure, we can try that. I see that we're still on slide 25. And as Brandi mentioned, we're just on the 2 to 4 week sprint cycles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can try to reshare it. Let's do that. Thanks everyone for your flexibility. There's always tech issues here and there, so we should be back up and running soon. But Ned, I just shared it with you. Perfect.
Yeah, there you go. Yep,
Okay.
there you go.
Great.
Okay, so sorry about that, guys, and thanks everyone for your patience. So I was on number 3, and of course this presentation can be shared with everyone, afterwards, working with Shelly. So after you define that backlog, again, what's the work required to get that job done? This is where the team aspect really comes into play, because in number 3, in that sprint planning area, the team decides. I want to stress that the team decides based on their understanding of the customer priorities. What's the right sequence of work to deliver on those customer priorities. Okay, so a key point of sort of team empowerment right there. And then number 4, with that list of high priority items, they begin that sprint. And sprints are usually 2 to 4 weeks, and they are really focused solely on completing those items outlined in that sprint plan. So who facilitates that that sprint? And that's something you commonly refer to as a scrum master. And that person is the key facilitator, and they are using techniques to do that, like daily stand-ups. Maybe you guys have heard of those things, but just 30 seconds on daily stand-ups. The objectives of those things are really important. Every day the team is interacting, and each team member is being asked the question, what did you accomplish yesterday? What's on your plate for today? And are there any blockers that are preventing you from doing your work, from moving forward? So you can see that type of facilitation and participation from all the team members really drives shared accountability amongst the team. Okay, and then number 6. So keep in mind, all of this can happen in say a 2-week period of time. There's a sprint review with the stakeholders, with the clients, where the work that team has done, is shared, with stakeholders, with clients, for them to give feedback. And the team, the sprint team, the project team, is part of those conversations to hear in real time, what that type of feedback is like. And then finally, an important point is that, really well-performing, agile teams take things like this seriously. Sprint retrospectives, asking themselves, what went well, what could have gone better. So that is at a high level, from my experience, the steps that teams that are using the Scrum approach of Agile will typically go through in executing their projects, and that's definitely we do something very similar to that here at the agency on behalf of our clients.
Yeah, and Ned, I would add to that it may be a good reflection time for you as you're listening in to think, when is your agency working at its best? And a lot of what we hear is of people saying, some teams, they already do this, and they don't even know that they're doing agile behaviors, but they're more of a dedicated team. They have a good cadence of communication. and a lot of what we hear is that this happens. People say, well, we're kind of doing this when it comes to new business or new client engagements. Not to point out the honeymoon period, but there is a level of a honeymoon period of excitement knowing about a new project and teams working together in this way. They're almost modeling these behaviors without applying all of the agile to it, not knowing that they're doing it. So, I would say looking at this and hearing about it, it seems like, whoa, I thought that we were talking about more flexibility and less structure, but really the agile methods, they have a lot of structure, but what the structure allows is for people to know what's next. Clients know that you're in a sprint. They know what you're focused on, and they know they're going to see things in 2 weeks. So everyone's in the loop on what's going on.
It's a great point. Great point, Brandi. Yeah, absolutely. It's about transparency and everyone knowing who's working on what, and that you're going to see something pretty quickly. Okay. So I jumped to the next slide just to make sure everyone sees a slide called the team. So just a minute on this. A team, within on an agile project is, a few things. First, it's got to be a cross-discipline group of people that are capable of delivering all aspects of the project. In best case scenarios, which I know is really hard to achieve, that group of people can be focused largely on that project. That's really hard for us to achieve here. There's competing projects, so that is one of the challenges of getting a team set up in a way that people can actually be allowed to focus on a project the way that's necessary to be able to do those daily stand-ups and things like that. Another key point is that team is largely self-organizing because of their constant collaboration. They're holding each other accountable. So, and that's where we get into, some of the challenges in, running agile and standard agency setups, because teams are, often very used to, an account manager or a project manager sort of, playing, and dare I use the word, sort of a, dictatorial role among the team about what should they be working on next. In this case, and that's it's hard for, people in an organization to accept this. The team is, along with their clients and product owners, defining what are the right priorities to be working on next. Okay, that product owner role, and in our case, we've seen people turn into product owners who generally have some sort of deep expertise in whatever the project is. Whether they've been someone who has been working in CRM for years, for example. Someone who's got deep technical skills in whatever the project is we're working on. Those people are they have to be the champions of the project or the product. They've really got to understand the business and the customer's requirements, and they got to be the kind of person who can boldly prioritize the work. And I've seen scenarios, and this is hard for people to stomach, but I've seen scenarios where clients have even been product owners, and clients have essentially become parts of the team. But more commonly, I've seen agency people acting as a client proxy. But the key is that person has to have real authority in making prioritization decisions. And that Scrum Master, again, that key facilitator, and really the person who isn't telling the team how to work, but setting up conversations and methods that really empower the team to work effectively, and that person also, a key part of their job is to help the team identify blockers and remove those blockers. All right, so Shelley, I'm going to pass it back to you for a second. So Brandi and I definitely wanted some feedback from other agency people about how many of you are seeing these roles such as product owner and Scrum Masters in your organization. And while that poll is happening, I'll tell you it is something that we have struggled with quite a bit. Figuring out do our project managers easily move into Scrum Master roles. Some have, some haven't. Who plays that product owner role? A natural tendency would be to say, oh, that should be an account person to play that product owner role. I think that could sometimes work, sometimes not. It's really about that person having expertise in that project or space. Okay. So Shelley, I'm not sure if you got any poll responses yet. Okay. Looks like the
All
poll
right.
is open.
Yep, the poll has been launched. Everyone knows what they need to do. And this one is only 2-choice answer, so I won't give too much time. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. All right, so let's take a look at the results. So 83% say yes, and we have 17% who say no.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. That's excellent to know. All right, so let's keep moving forward. Let's see if we can do this without my screen crashing again. Just to confirm, Brandi, can you see the next slide? What makes Agile work?
Yeah, I think we're good. So
Okay.
Ned talked you through a lot of the setup in terms of what Agile looks like in the team. And I think it's important to emphasize what makes it work is the team. And it's really about the team having authority. And this doesn't happen overnight. This isn't a flip of the switch. You don't wake up tomorrow and become an Agile agency, but you recognize that this is something that you want and you start to instill that into the organization. And, moving on to the next slide, I think that we can talk through that, traditionally, most agencies started out with a model similar to the left, and many still have that. There are business owners, people have to run the companies, and it's a very top-down model, and sometimes can be bureaucratic in terms of how the company runs. And what is at odds with that, with the Agile philosophy and structure, is that an Agile team, similar to the image on the right, is that it's an iterative team. It's a team that's made up of very different skill sets, very different levels, could have different responsibilities than traditional agency roles, and so this can feel at odds with one another. And so what's going to be really important is how to identify and address how management teams are going to work within this, because what can be difficult is Agile teams get started, their projects get going, they've identified the product owners, and then it's trumped by a management stakeholder that wasn't involved in the setup of the project, hasn't planned the work, hasn't been on all the reviews, and which is another reason why or that can happen with clients that you've been operating, and that just kind of collapses the feeling and the morale of the Agile team. So you don't have to solve all those things to get started, but you have to be aware of that so that you can manage around it and that you can solve for when those situations come up. And what over time, with kind of a consistent flow and cadence of being together, these things start to work themselves out. As Ned and I were working through this presentation and looking at experts in the industry, there's a couple things that just really resonated for us. Jack Skills, who's the founder and CEO of Agency Agile, which is a consultancy company, he preaches that uninformed management, rooted in the centuries-old mistaken belief that the best way to manage is to tell people what to do, is kind of at the core what is working against agencies implementing different methods. And another, really powerful quote that we were finding is just with Steve Denning, who is the author of The Age of Agile, that instead of power trickling down from the top, Agile recognizes that the future of a firm depends on inspiring those that are doing the work. And I think that is kind of a key phrase to think about, is allowing the team members doing the work to manage themselves and their teams and the work that they're doing, and getting the feedback at the right times so that they feel like they are moving the work forward. And we actually want to go right back into another poll that we want to get some thoughts from you, is what do you feel like has been a key challenge in your organizations, whether if you did adopt, you have already embraced Agile and you're working in it, or if you are trying to, what do you see as the challenge? Is Is it the senior management? Is it the team members adopting and accepting the methods? Is it the client involvement, or is it a training? We would love to hear from you on that.
Great, so our final poll has already been launched. I see some answers coming in, which is fantastic. Thank you guys for getting involved. A couple more seconds, take some time to think about your answer and select the one that feels right for you. I forgot to mention this before, but if you guys are sitting in a group of people, and I know you can only answer with one person, one choice, so maybe take a show of hands to see what the group is feeling and thinking and submit with that answer. Okay, I see we're at 67%, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, let's take a look at the results. So we have 40% say internal team members accepting and adopting the methods, and the last 60% say all of the above.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yep, and that's I can confidently say in my experience of we're going to get Agile implemented, I'd say all of the above. We've been through all of these challenges, and we're still going through them. These, as Brandi said, these things cannot be solved overnight. And just confirm, can you guys see my screen?
Yep, I can.
Okay. Something seems to happen when that poll launches that I apologize for this, but it's not advancing. Okay, there we go. Do you guys see the 70% on top?
Yep, I think you're good.
Okay, great, thanks. So as I don't think any of us are surprised by some of the data on this screen from a 2017 survey by the Scrum Alliance, that the top challenges, and this is teams that are running in Agile, is that it's adherence to companies want to adhere to that top-down command and control approach to management. So I don't have to go through all this data, but it confirms what we are all experiencing. There are definitely challenges to implementing this. And then another few points, and I would echo all of these points through my experience in working to implement Agile. Here's a list of the challenges that everyone should expect. It's across the board, from lack of experience to lack of support. Number 5, and this to me is probably a key one: lack of support for the cultural transition necessary to operate in that type. But I don't want to leave you guys with 2 slides that seem a little bit negative, because we have had some great success with this. So I'm not going to read these quotes, but the first one, a client of ours, and this is a while back, saying, and the members of this team included people from the client organization. This manager, coming to us and saying, "Wow, this group of people has honestly done more in 2 days than might get done in 2 months." I know that sounds a little bad, but they're so thrilled with the progress by really having a collaborative team, who's allowed to focus on a particular project, really work using these methods. And then, also from, a staffer here at GTB, an account guy who's been an account guy for a long time, really has come to appreciate the idea that he doesn't have to do, constant deck writing to, update, clients on status and, and selling them on what the latest deliverable is, because, he knows the clients are, part of the conversation and they are aware. So we'll keep moving forward as, a key part of this presentation. So what do we need to do to get started, as we bring others in the, in the advertising, world on board with this approach? So, Brandi, take it away with some of these points.
Yeah, and I think something to point back to your quote from your client, where they feel like you're getting more done. I think a lot of that comes in terms of them knowing what you're doing and it being transparent of what they're focusing on. So yeah, how to get started. There's a lot of thoughts and methods and things that we've talked about, and some of you have already started on this, so I wouldn't take this as you don't need to think about it. These are just some things that we think are important to continue to change the culture, if that's something that you're doing. But first, we would say, don't be afraid to bring it forward. If if you're learning about Agile, you see that these methods could help your organization, um, bring it forward. Talk to the right people. Find an advocate in management or just a team member that you know that has a lot of influence, and present information to management or the circle of influence in a way that is in management terms. And that's just some kind of advice we have, that sometimes, depending on how your company is structured, those making operational decisions may not be the ones that are in the middle of the day-to-day work and know about some of these newer methods. So framing up a recommendation to them in terms of how changing or setting up a team could help your teams become more collaborative, how the organization could be more effective, how the teams could be more efficient, ultimately providing more profitability, is where interest will peak with the management team to hear more. Tell me more. Let's talk about what you mean by that. So that's some advice we have. In terms of setting up your team, we think it's really important that you take some time to build a training plan. What is the makeup of the team that's going to do this? What do they know right now? And what training do you need? And we would emphasize here that training is not just an online course, one Scrum Master course, one webinar. It could be a makeup based on who you have internally, what expertise they have, and where you need to augment that with others. So you could have new hires that are coming in that have a lot of experience. Well, you can utilize the new hires or industry experts to help shape out your teams. You may need to complement that with outside consultants that have been specialized in how to change a culture to instill new methods. Change management is not something that can be taken lightly when it comes to how your companies are operating. And then the other thing that we would say is really take some time to define work that would be right for Agile. Not everything will be, depending on how your organization is set up. Either it could be because the work's not quite right, it either goes too fast already or it goes too slow, and maybe it's not the right client makeup that you feel like you can engage with. Or the team and their experiences. So spend some time probably with a management sponsor, whoever you have as an advocate, to figure out what projects you can pilot, either that be clients or particular projects as well.
Then a key point I believe is, and this is from experience, when you're building a team, when you're defining a group of people to work on projects in an Agile framework, really spend some time on defining those roles. Make sure people understand those roles and responsibilities, because things can quickly go awry, as they can anywhere, when people aren't clear about roles and responsibilities. And it's not just about the roles and responsibilities of, say, a product owner or a Scrum Master. It's also about the the commitment that team members need to make to working in this method. That's really key. It is a heightened level of engagement for the team members on the project team. And next, you got to bring your clients along for the ride. It doesn't work if you just say, okay, we're going to run our project in an Agile fashion, internally. And the reason I say it doesn't work is because clients or your stakeholders are going to have to change the way that they work with you guys. They're going to have to in many cases change from sort of being a passive commentator on the work when big deliverables are ready to review. Instead, they're right in the weeds with you guys, defining what are the priorities, making important decisions that can define what's the big next step that the project takes. So you've got to bring your clients along for the ride, and that includes, from my experience in training about Agile as well. Open that dialogue with clients, talk to them about their willingness to work this way, also to be trained in these methods. And then the folks, teams got to take it seriously. And what I mean by that is, things like I talked about before, those daily check-ins, those retrospectives, those sprint reviews. The minute you start to see team members, checking out from your, daily, check-ins, or not all the right people participating in sprint retrospectives, for example, or people, getting pulled off one project to go on to another, without any, without any sort of warning about that. The win definitely comes out of the sales of an Agile team. And then before you start, decide how you're going to solve, you're going to, resolve, issues, and how you're going to evolve, because it's not hard to figure out the kind of issues that you're going to run into when you start to, talk about this different level of accountability, both, with internal people and with clients. So think in, early about how, when those issues arise, what's your method for solving those problems. All right.
Yeah, so that kind of brings us to the Q&A section that we have really enjoyed giving you guys some content and some thoughts and direction for you as an organization to think about what change is necessary for your agency and how you may go about that change. So Shelley, I think we can go into the Q&A if everyone else.
Fantastic. So just a friendly reminder to everyone listening in, if there's something that you would like to ask Brandi or Ned, or something you want them to dig in deeper or clarify, this is your chance to ask those questions. So to do so, there is a question box in your go-to panel. You can type in your question again, just like a chat box. I'll be reading out those questions from our audience, and we'll get you guys some good answers. So go ahead and do that whenever you can. But I'm going to jump right into it. I see some questions already coming in. So for either one of you, how did you get started with using Agile in your organization?
I'm happy to take that one, Brandi, and you can
Sure.
add in. So we did have some people with experience in it, but we quickly realized that we needed help with the cultural change aspects, the change management aspects of starting to work in an Agile fashion. So we did bring in some outside help, and that outside help did not only train people internally, but we also set it up in a way that we opened that dialogue to clients. So clients would understand how the way we run projects are going to change and what it means for them. And I will say that was received, very positively. Clients liked the fact that we were evolving. We were trying to get increase the velocity of our projects on their behalf. So the fact that we did call in some outside expertise, I think really accelerated things for us. And if you guys can do it, I would suggest it. And to the point Brandi made earlier, it's not just getting Scrum training for people in your organization. It's looking at it deeper about how the team needs to change.
Okay, great. I see more questions coming in. How would Agile sprints work with regulatory reviews?
And you mean legal reviews? Yeah.
I believe so, but if the person wouldn't mind clarifying for us. Yes, okay, yes, legal.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, some of the work we do is in the automotive industry. So everything we do has to be what we call product correct. So, as appropriate, the people who are in charge of, those reviews are, kept, well aware of, our timing, our sprint timing. And, those things are defined as tasks that need to be accomplished, within a sprint. But that's not to say that, you do still have to deal with, when you are, ready to go live with something. Say you've been, working on, multiple, sprints for several weeks or several months, and you're finally ready to, launch this thing to the public. You do have to, accommodate, that final, audit review. So the key is to plan for those things. And make one other point on that, and that by involving the people who are responsible for making those decisions, throughout the life of the project, seeing where the project's trajectory is going, what kind of decisions that you're making, it makes them much more willing to, give feedback that can guide the project. So, getting that, legal, regulatory, compliance feedback throughout the project instead of, trying to, come up with a great big idea that you realize gets shot down at the end because it's, against legal compliance. So I hope
Yeah, I
that
would
answers.
definitely say to start there that involving your main point of contact is your clients. And I think once they sometimes see how much time their internal legal requires, but then they see how the team is working in sprints, they will help influence an internal change on their side that, 2 weeks or 10 days to review, it's not going to cut it in this world of these projects that they're working on. So that may take a couple hiccups to get through, but sometimes
Yep.
you can utilize that point of contact to help influence that.
Great question, though.
Okay, a couple more questions are coming down the pipe. This methodology obviously requires additional time commitment from the clients. How have you addressed that with clients, and has it been successful?
I'll start that, and then I'll let you
Yep.
tie into that. But it's kind of back to some of the getting started that we said, is that it is going to be, to get started, it is going to be appropriate for you to think about your current relationships and where you have trust built, and a deep relationship where they're going to give you some leeway, and you can say to them, hey, we're looking at making some changes. We have a great relationship with you. We would like to utilize you and your team to do this. Here's why. We're hoping to gain efficiencies for you. Similar to how I said, present things to management, you present it to client in a way that's going to benefit them back. So then their ears are perked up and they say, okay, what do you need me to do? But while it seems like it is requiring more time, you could almost parallel that it's saving them time in a way, because if they don't know where things are and they feel like they need to understand, and then they get something presented to them that was not on the same page with what they thought, or sometimes they have their own layers internally, right? So they gave you direction, their boss comes in, swoops in, gives different direction. That doesn't make them look good or the agency look good. So it really saves them time that they know that the things that are being created are out there. So I think it's positioning it in a way to them that they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're going to do it and how it could benefit them. Ned, what would you add to that?
Absolutely. And we were, very, very nervous about that as we started to go down the path. But what we quickly realized is, and there has been some hiccups with it, but generally, our clients that are working with us, on a day-to-day basis in this fashion, love the fact that, their voice and their input can be heard, by the team doing the work. Their voice and their input can have, an influence that they can see results from, pretty quickly. So, it sort of can work itself out when managed appropriately. But it's a good question, and it goes back to that point about it does change the expectations you have of your clients. So you got to go into it carefully, but you've got to make sure that you outline the benefits for them. More add adaptability in the project, more time for their voice to be heard, and account for changes that they want made.
Okay, great. I see we have a couple more questions, but I want to be mindful of timing because I know we've gone past our time. Ned and Brandi, do you guys have a couple more minutes, or should we have these folks reach out to you directly with any further questions?
I've got a couple more minutes. That's fine.
Yeah, I think we can do both of those things.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's do one more question, and then anyone else who we didn't get your question, unfortunately, we'll definitely share Ned and Brandi's contact information so you can reach out to them directly and get some good answers. So our last question will be this: how do you handle the time commitment for the creative teams if they are assigned to more than one projects? In other words, if they have multiple stand-up meetings they need to attend, how do you prioritize for them?
It's an excellent question. And we have definitely struggled with that. We do still struggle with that in some areas. But one of the things, and it can get a little more, complicated, is that you start to look at, that collection of projects that those, team members are working on as a work stream. In a best case scenario, there's some, relationship between those projects. and that you can actually use some of these methods to do daily stand-ups for a body of work as opposed to one project. So I know that scenario might not work for everyone. So that's one possibility. Think of a collection of projects as a work stream, as a portfolio of work. The second way to do it is for those multiple teams to coordinate in a very detailed way about who has what people at what time. It's that collaboration by scrum masters, project managers, etc. Is critical, because like I said before, as soon as you have people who can't show up for stand-ups or reviews because they're on competing projects, the wind sort of comes out of the sails of the team. So that's one of those problems that each organization has to figure out how to solve for themselves. But those are two ways that we've done it: sort of that work stream method, and then scrum masters coordinating in a really detailed way between themselves about allocating people's time for those daily activities.
Yeah, I would agree. I was going to say group the work, and that's kind of something that you hear time and time again. And also, instead of thinking about each project being assigned to different people, you look at how you can bring the work to different groups. So they may have a series of work. So then you're meeting about that series, and you may bring people into the group that are, as additional work comes in, and then maybe they fall out every so often as well.
Okay, fantastic. So, oh, sorry, Brandi.
I was just going to say not to act like that's super easy to do. We know, we've seen it happen, which is why it's important to find the right group of work.
Great. So I know we've gone over 5 minutes, so we appreciate everyone who is hung on with us. But again, for any of those questions we weren't able to get to, please reach out to Ned and Brandi. Their email addresses and their LinkedIn contact information is on the screen. They are our thought leaders, and they are here to help, so feel free to reach out to them. I want to give a huge thank you to both of them for being here with us and presenting this fantastic, insightful webinar that we're hoping you guys are walking away from having learned so much and gotten some good guidance. A survey will be coming out right after this webinar. If you guys can take 2 minutes to share some feedback, that would be fantastic. A question we get often is, can you guys get access to this presentation? And you can. If you fill out the survey, you'll get a link for the PDF of the deck, so you have all these great resources at your hand. We also want to mention again, this is a brand new series, The Evolution of Project Management, and we have 3 more webinars after this. And Ned and Brandi will actually be back with us for a second webinar later in the series, but the next one is on the 17th, Emotional Intelligence. Then we have the 24th of January, Roles and Responsibilities in the Modern Agency, which is the one with Ned and Brandi. And the last one, February 2nd, is Connecting Producers with Finance. So we hope to see you guys again in those sessions in the series. And we thank you guys all, and we hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.